in the early fall of 1978. In a quiet town of Webster, Massachusetts, was shaken by the mysterious disappearance of a 4-year-old boy. When Andrew and his cousin were walking down a path which led to a deeper portion of woods, and a 4-year-old boy hasn't been seen since. Andrew Amato, is more commonly known as Andy, was born on the 1st of February 1974, and lived with his family including his parents, and 7-year-old sister, in nearby mobile homes on Richards Avenue, in a suburb of Webster, Massachusetts. Only about an 18-minute walk away from the nearby Freeman's Brook stream. Around the corner of his close-knit neighborhood, was surrounded by a remote wooded area of the region, which was located just off Route 52, now Interstate 395, about 18 miles from his home. Like children of his own age, Andrew was also very active, enjoys playing outdoors with the kids in the neighborhood in his spare time, as long as they go no further than the neighborhood. Andrew was described by neighbors as a very friendly and kind boy, who was like many young boys rebellious, mischievous, and well-spirited. The local people who knew him called him the Goodwill Ambassador. It was a euphoric Saturday morning, in the early morning hours of September 30th, 1978. As usual, his 6-year-old cousin, Jeannie, would spend the day to come around and play with their siblings for the weekend. And Andrew, his 7-year-old sister, and his cousin, Jeannie, all 3 kids were in the woods, behind a nearby Ash Street trailer park, and playing together in an orderly and joyful way under nice fall weather. While their mother was inside, under the assumption that his 7-year-old sister will be responsible enough to look after 2 little brothers, instilling confidence in the minds of their parents, that the kids were safe to look after themselves. By less than 3 hours later then, the kids started having an argument. After a heated argument, his sister was supposed to turn around and go indoors, while Andrew decided to bring his cousin, Jeannie, along with him to take a deer trail that only took them deeper into the forest, without his sister. But before they leave, they's told to go no further than the street block. But they disobeyed and went anyways. For children at that age, it is generally incredibly hard to get cognitive enough of an inner sense of right or wrong. After which, they were heading down a path towards Route 52, now Route 395, which is on the Connecticut border, and only a 10 to 15 minute walk from Rhode Island, a wooded area that was supposed to be off limits to the kids. They walked the trail through the forest. That's how big the place was as they ventured deeper into the forest, with rocky ridge lines, and a dense covering of trees. After walking for a while, Andrew slipped and injured himself, and dropped his favorite toy Weeble in the process. He started crying, and screaming at the top of his lungs. He got to his feet, and started to run around in circles, because he could not find it. Andrew's cousin told him to wait where he was until getting back, and the cousin went back to their house to get help, and then upon the family came back to where he was left, at approximately 10:30 AM, but Andrew was nowhere to be found, and he has never been heard from again. How could Andrew have just disappeared without a trace? The news spread quickly of Andrew's disappearance, and the community came together to search for him, knocking on every door, and fanning out across the neighborhood. An extensive search of the area was conducted, which lasted 10 days, involving the National Guard, and 1,000 volunteers, but there was no trace of Andrew, or his whereabouts. For this case, the abduction investigators have often theorized that Andrew was wandering the woods for hours, and walking out to Route 52, on which was abducted by a motorist passing through nearby Connecticut, or Rhode Island. It was deemed possible at the time that Andrew may have left of his own accord for a reason still unestablished, or that he had been abducted after struggling against an abductor. And I wonder as to whether or not a predatory animal, such as a mountain lion or cougar, grabbed him at the time of the disappearance. Because they are quite fast and dangerous predators, it could have grabbed him and pulled him into the woods. But no blood or his body was found around the area of his disappearance. In which the next possible theory had been highlighted, that abductor could have lured Andrew into a van, or a deserted house, and drove as far away as they could from this area. Some had even said that, at the time of the boy's disappearance, saw a boy scrambling in the back of a car, on the highway, as if he was in a panic, and trying to escape. Even though, there had been numerous theories, were made at the time, but nothing accurate conclusion, came from these clues either. 8 days after his disappearance, one discovery, helped investigation pinpoint the route, that was a Mickey Mouse shirt, was found stained, and wrapped in a paper bag in Woburn, Massachusetts. But his body was still nowhere to be found. Which exactly matched the white t-shirt Andrew was wearing, on the day of the disappearance. This likely means someone took Andrew, ate where he was left. The investigators began to suspect, that the potential suspects is over in town somewhere. It all began back in the early 1970s, the Massachusetts community, watched on in fears as many children disappeared, without a trace across this area. The first possible suspect for the case, is a gentleman, by the name of Nathaniel Barjona, aka David Brown, who is the convicted child molester, and kidnapper, suspected serial killer, and cannibal. He's been tied to all sorts of awful things, happening to children across the country including, Massachusetts, not far from Andrew's last known location. Decoded notebooks authored by Barjona, describe torturing, and eating children, including recipes involving children's body parts. At the time, Barjona had been charged with murdering a young male, and cooking, and feeding his remains, to his neighbors at a cookout. Andrew Amato's name was listed in that same journal, though he denied any involvement in his disappearance. He is also considered a possible suspect, in the 1973 Connecticut disappearance of Janice Pocket, the 1996 Montana abduction of Zachary Ramsey, and the 1977 Wyoming disappearance of Amanda Gallion. In 2000, investigators found the bone fragments of a child buried 6 feet underneath his dirt-floored garage in Montana. The bone fragments were not those of Zachary Ramsey. Janice and Amanda's families sent their DNA for comparison to the remains, but they also did not match. Andrew's DNA was never compared with the bones. Investigators also believe Barjona was involved in cannibalism. Human hair was found in a meat grinder at his home. It did not belong to any of his possible missing victims. The reason why investigators have questioned his possible involvement in Andrew's disappearance was since he grew up in Webster, Massachusetts, at the time. Dudley is only 33 minutes away from Jefferson. In December of 2001, a handwritten list by Barjona surfaced. It was titled, Lake Webster, and it included the names of multiple alleged victims of Barjona. Some news reports have falsely claimed that Andrew was among the children on the list. But he wasn't, and there's no there evidence suggesting he was involved in the case. Barjona's given name was David P. Brown, and up until 1991. Barjona died of a blood clot in Montana prison in 2008. He was 51 years old when he died. He was never charged with any wrongdoing in Andrew's case, and there's no evidence suggesting his involvement in the case. In June of 1998, investigators excavated a wooded area off of Minebrook Road. They learned that possible evidence related to the case was possibly buried in the area. The area was approximately 5 miles away from the area of his disappearance. Nothing was discovered as a result of the search. The case gradually went cold, and they could say a suspect would remain a mystery, until November of 2003. 44 years after Andrew's disappearance, when a man whose identity has not been released, confessed on his deathbed to his mother, and his sibling. He had passed away from lung cancer, and after 4 years, his family decided to divulge the information to authorities. It is reported that this man was a Rhode Island laborer, and was 53 years old, at the time of Andrew's apparent abduction. He came to authorities' attention, after saying he heard of the well-publicized man, hung over his radio. He was the one, who would find Andrew's missing weeble, under a pile of leaves. This area had already been searched, before, and the toy was not there. For an undisclosed reason, investigators have declined to reveal the suspect's name, or any other information, but call his confession credible. And authorities excavated a rural area, near Burrillville, Rhode Island, about 10 miles away from where Andrew Amato last seen, as specified in the confession. This time, the search involves 4 teams, using 5 cadaver dogs. But no remains, or evidence was found. Meaning that, they didn't have anything tangible to link Nathaniel Barjona to Andrew's disappearance, and the confession from the other guy turned up nothing either. There was a lot of woodland around where Andrew vanished. A small body could easily be overlooked during the searches. That's not to say he couldn't have been picked up by a stranger. The lack of the vital evidence means that they were not able to build evidence to make that person a solid suspect in this case. It was a great loss to his family, since Andrew vanished, and his body still hasn't been found. So how did the police convict the well-disclosed suspects without a body? To this day, Andrew Amato has been missing for over the past 4 decades, and Andrew's family is still holding out hope for discovering his body, to bring his remains home to be laid to rest, so that they can finally start to rebuild their lives.